Professor Chuck Freilich, former Israeli Deputy National Security Advisor. And Chuck, how likely is it that Iran would attack with a sort of a direct attack on an Israeli city like Haifa? And then the question is, how far does Israel escalate after something like that?
Well, I think that would certainly be a major escalation on their part. And I would tend to doubt that they want to go that far, because that would probably require a significant further escalation on our part. And that hasn't usually been their modus operandi. They typically look for some covert response, which is hard to attribute to them. This would be very obvious. And Israel would have a good case for responding. I think that the real question, though, is we want to avoid a major escalation with Iran. And if it's going to happen, and it may happen at some point, it should be for a really good reason, such as if and when we've managed to cause major damage to their nuclear program. We didn't achieve that this time. So to get a potentially severe Iranian response for what was at best a tactical achievement, a dramatic one in terms of Israel's operational capability that was demonstrated here, and not for the first time. But for a minor achievement, I don't think we want that. And your correspondent correctly pointed out that, of course, today we have Iron Dome. We didn't in 2006. But on the other hand, they had about 13,000 rockets at the time. Today, they've got 130,000 rockets directed at Israel. And if and when we get into a significant response, the damage to Israel's home front is going to be severe. We don't need that, again, unless it's for a very good reason.
Right. Now, Chuck, you mentioned this incident in Iran as perhaps in some ways a message to the Biden administration, or discussed it in terms of its impact on the Biden administration. Our senior international affairs correspondent prepared a report breaking that down. Let's take a listen.
Joe Biden has a plan. The Middle East is not cooperating. The U.S. president-elect wants an America more at ease with the world. And then comes the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, with Iran and reportedly Israel throwing Biden right in the middle of their shadow war.
I want to say to you, America is back. Multilateralism is back. Diplomacy is back.
And so the Biden team has said the Iran nuclear deal should be back too. Iran going back to following the rules of the deal. The U.S. then rejoining. The Fakhrizadeh killing might not change that, or it could insert another potential demand. A potential demand by Iran that Biden stop Israel from killing Iranian soldiers or scientists.
All the enemies of Islamic Iran know that the Iranian nation and officials are too brave and zealous to ignore this criminal act. The relevant authorities will respond to this crime in a timely and appropriate manner.
That would turn a two-party negotiation into a three-party negotiation, with Biden needing to use carrots and sticks with both Iran and Israel. And here, Israel's continued warning to Washington, to Brussels, and to whomever still does not want to listen. Israel is an interested third party to the Iran nuclear deal, with its own national interests. Israel can play spoiler, and if need be, Israel will.
Remember that name, Fakhrizadeh.
And Chuck, so let me ask you, we know Secretary of State Pompeo was just in Israel last week. So how much of this do you think was done perhaps in coordination with the Trump administration to an attempt to, let's say, box in or limit, at least for the short term, diplomatic overtures by the incoming Biden administration to Iran?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but clearly that is the perception in the United States, at least among many people. And that's a perception that I don't think that we should want to have created. Biden has got a long record of being a close friend of Israel's. I don't think that we want to start his presidency by alienating him, by pushing him onto the other side. What we should be doing is coordinating policy with him, trying to work out the terms for what a better deal would look like. And secondly, he has said that he wants to go back to the old deal as a basis for achieving a new one. He never explained the linkage between the two, how you go from the one to the other. I think it's quite difficult. We don't want him just to go back to the old deal. Well, how does he propose to get to the new one? And it's not clear that that can be done. So I think there's a lot of basis for serious bilateral discussion here at the highest levels. And I'm afraid that what we did now is put ourselves in an adversarial role with an administration which is quite favorable to Israel. The president himself, the vice president, the secretary of state, and others. Not a good start.
How likely do you think it is, though, you're talking about an incoming Biden administration, a Trump administration still has a little over 6 weeks, I believe, left in office. It is a possibility for them still to take more action against Iran. I mean, they are saying more sanctions. What possibility that we could see something along these lines, a covert action, even some kind of military action from the Trump administration, not from Israel?
Well, if the Trump administration wants to add further sanctions or take covert action, which is not attributed to Israel, then I don't think we have a problem with that, as long as it's not attributed to us. The possibility that's been raised is that actually the targeted killing here was designed to lead to a significant Iranian response, whether against Israel or the U.S., and that this would then serve as a pretext for Trump maybe to go out literally with a blast and take significant military action against Iran, and that Israel would be blamed for. And I don't think that we want to do that. Now, maybe 6 months ago or more, we would have wanted to see the United States take major military action against Iran. In the last few weeks before a new administration comes in, I don't think that's the case, especially since I don't think that what Trump would do would be to take really decisive military action. It's one thing if he was going to go in and really take out the Iranian nuclear program. I don't think that that's going to happen. What we would see is some limited action for which Israel would be blamed and which would achieve, at best, a moderate outcome.
All right. Well, it certainly looks like, at any rate, these last few weeks and months of the Trump administration are perhaps likely one way or the other to be eventful or have impact here in the region. Professor Chuck Freilich, thank you for joining us.